What kind of man chooses a child no one else wants, especially when the world already believes he is broken? That was the silent question hanging in the frozen Montana air on New Year's morning, when Nathan Cole stepped out from the line of distant onlookers and claimed Lily Carter as his own. The sky was wide and pale, the wind sharp enough to sting skin and memory alike, and the field where the adoption fair had been set up looked more like a marketplace of discarded hopes than a place for children to find homes. Lily stood alone beside a wooden post, clutching a faceless rag doll, her patched coat hanging loosely on her small frame. She did not cry. She had long learned that crying did nothing but make others uncomfortable. The only time her voice broke was when she whispered, almost to herself, that no one would ever choose her. It was that small, defeated truth that pierced through the quiet armor of the man with the scar. Nathan Cole was known in town but never understood. The long scar cutting down his left cheek was the first thing people noticed, and the silence that always followed him was the second. Some said a horse did it. Others swore it came from a drunken brawl in a mining town. The truth was darker and lonelier than rumors could imagine, but Nathan never corrected them. He kept to his ranch, his herd, his routines, and the empty rooms of a house too large for one man. He had sworn long ago never to reach out again, never to open a door that might once more invite loss inside. But then came this winter morning, and this child, and the fragile sentence she spoke into the wind. Something inside him shifted, painfully, quietly, like an old door that had not been opened in years. He did not bargain. He did not hesitate. He simply said he would take her. The officials blinked in surprise. The crowd murmured. Lily stared at him as if he might disappear if she moved too quickly. Nathan's voice was rough when he said she would come home with him that day, and his hand was steady when he signed the papers. When Lily was guided toward his wagon, she walked carefully, as though the frozen ground might break open beneath her. He helped her climb up, then climbed in beside her, keeping just enough distance so she would not feel cornered. The horses started forward, hooves striking rhythm into the snow-covered road, and a long silence filled the space between them. Nathan spoke first, slowly, honestly. He told her he had never been a father. He said he would try, and that he would not harm her. Lily nodded, folding her doll into her lap like a shield. She did not yet trust that promises could last. But when she looked at his scarred face, she saw no anger there, only a heaviness that matched the quiet ache she carried in her chest. They did not talk much for the rest of the journey, yet the silence no longer felt empty. It felt like two lonely lives beginning to listen to each other. When the wagon rolled onto Cole Ranch, the land opened wide around them. 15,000 acres of open range, fences stretching toward the horizon, barns standing rugged against the winter sky. The house was large but stern, shaped by a life lived in labor rather than decoration. To Lily, it seemed enormous, echoing and cold, but also strangely safe. Nathan showed her the small bedroom he had prepared in haste. It was bare, a bed, a window, a dresser with not much in it. But it was hers. No other children, no crowded bunks. Just a door she could close and a place where her doll could rest beside her pillow. Then came Helen Park. Calm, meticulous, kind. Helen brought warmth into the quiet halls like a lamp being lit at dusk. She did not overwhelm Lily with questions or pity. Instead, she taught her simple routines, helped her wash and dress, guided her gently like one guiding a frightened foal. Lily learned to measure flour in the kitchen, to fold laundry, to sweep floors, to sit down at the table as though she belonged there. Nathan did not always know what to say, but he learned to listen. Some nights the silence between them softened into something almost like comfort. Still, the fear inside Lily did not fade easily. She tried to be perfect. She moved carefully. She waited for the day someone would arrive to take her away. Nathan noticed. There were evenings when he stood outside her door, his scar faintly lit by lamplight, wanting to say something that would ease the fear, but words were slow to come to him. So instead, He showed up at breakfast every morning. He made sure her plate was full. He let her ride with him across the fields. Gradually, the idea took root in Lily's heart. Perhaps she was not temporary here. The town, however, did not accept so easily. In the general store, whispers followed Nathan as they always had. But now those whispers wrapped around Lily too. A solitary man with a scar taking in a child. What did he want? What right did he have? Suspicion spread like frost. Nathan ignored it until the day he had to walk Lily into the schoolhouse. The classroom felt colder than the winter air. Miss Abigail Stone looked at Lily with quiet distance and placed her among the slower students without a word of welcome. Children laughed at Lily's clothes, at her silence, at the fact that no mother came to help her. Lily lowered her gaze and absorbed every sting without reacting. Nathan saw the marks these moments left, though they were not on the skin. He wanted to pull her out, shield her from it all. But when Lily asked to stay, to try, he listened, and he promised he would step in if the world became too cruel. In the evenings, Lily read while Nathan mended tack by the fire. Sometimes Helen would hum softly in the kitchen. The house slowly changed. It was still quiet, but it was no longer empty. And under the endless western sky, an invisible thread began binding two damaged hearts together, one cautious step at a time. Winter loosened its grip on Montana slowly, as though the land itself was cautious about trusting warmth again. Snow melted into damp earth, the wind softened, and the sky shifted from steel gray to the pale blue promise of spring. At Cole Ranch, life began to move into quieter rhythms, and Lily Carter learned, one small step at a time, what it meant to exist without fear tightening every breath. But safety, true safety, did not come overnight. It came in fragments, in moments that seemed fragile enough to shatter if anyone spoke too loudly about them. In the mornings, Helen Park guided Lily through simple routines, never hurried, never harsh. Lily folded linens with small, careful hands. She learned to measure oats for breakfast and sweep the hallway floors. These acts, ordinary to most, were revelations to a child who had never been trusted with more than silence. Helen spoke softly, her voice calm and even, giving instructions and then letting Lily try. Mistakes were not punished. They were corrected, thoughtfully, gently. Each time Lily did something right, Helen would give a small nod. Not exaggerated praise, not pity, just acknowledgement. And that, more than anything, made Lily feel real. Nathan watched these changes from a distance at first. He wasn't used to conversation. He wasn't used to being needed. But gradually, he began to sit with Lily at the table longer, asking simple questions about her day. She answered quietly at first, then with more words. The ranch hands noticed the difference too. Jack Monroe, the foreman, greeted Lily when she passed the barn, offering a respectful hat tip. The men spoke carefully around her, partly out of politeness, partly because Nathan's silence had always demanded respect. Whenever work allowed, Nathan took Lily riding. She clutched the saddle horn tightly at first, heart pounding, but Nathan taught slowly, with a patience she had never experienced before. He rode beside her, steady and unhurried, letting her find her balance rather than commanding it. The land stretched wide around them, and for the first time, Lily saw the world not as a wall closing in, but as space she was allowed to exist in. Yet fear still lingered beneath the surface. Lily listened for footsteps outside her bedroom at night, bracing for the moment someone might come to take her away. Nathan often passed her door then, pausing, wanting to tell her she was safe but uncertain how to speak the words. He settled instead on consistency, showing up every day, every meal, every ride, like a vow spoken without sound. The town did not share his quiet acceptance. Whispers followed them whenever they came into town for supplies. Women from the church circle stared. Men in the saloon muttered. A scarred loner with a child. What future could that be? Some questioned Helen for staying. Others guessed motives that were neither kind nor true. Lily heard fragments of their words. She pretended not to, but they sank in like cold wind. School brought a new layer of test. Miss Abigail Stone remained distant, never cruel, but never kind either. Lily was placed where expectations were low. Children mocked the scar on Nathan's face when he came to collect her. Lily said nothing, but her shoulders stiffened. That evening she ate in silence until Nathan quietly reminded her that other people's ignorance did not change who she was becoming. She listened. She didn't fully believe him, but she wanted to. There were moments of healing. The first came when Helen suggested celebrating Lily's small successes, reading a paragraph aloud, finishing a chore well, helping in the kitchen without fear. These weren't rewards. They were acknowledgments that Lily's life mattered now. Another came when Lily laughed for the first time at the ranch. It was a soft, surprised sound that seemed to startle even her. Nathan heard it from the next room and stopped working, still as stone, letting the moment stay untouched. Trust was still delicate. Whenever Nathan raised his voice to call across the yard, Lily's body tensed. When a stranger approached the house, her breath quickened. But with each day at Cole Ranch, the tension eased just a fraction, replaced by something unfamiliar. Hope. Then came the news of the petition. It began as a whisper. Someone in town, no one knew who, had filed to remove Lily from Nathan's guardianship, arguing he was unfit. The justification was dressed in polite legal language, but the meaning was simple. A scarred, solitary man could not possibly raise a child well. The document suggested Lily would be safer elsewhere. Lily heard before Nathan intended to tell her. Panic surged instantly. Bags, leaving, loss. Not again. Nathan sat beside her at the table, his voice steady even as anger churned beneath the surface. He explained that he had hired Michael Turner, a lawyer known for fairness and clarity. They would go to court. They would fight. He said the words because they were true, but also because Lily needed to hear them spoken aloud. She stared at him for a long time, then finally asked the question she had been afraid to form. Will they take me? Nathan didn't make promises he couldn't guarantee, but he did promise this: he would not stop fighting for her. The ranch closed ranks. Jack Monroe offered support without hesitation. Helen stood taller than ever, calm but unyielding. Eleanor Hayes from the Women's Society began organizing discreetly, gathering testimony from anyone willing to speak on Lily's behalf. It wasn't everyone, but it was enough to light a spark of resistance against the tide of judgment. As the court date neared, Nathan found himself waking in the middle of the night, the scar on his cheek aching like an old memory come back to life. Too much of his past had been shaped by losses he couldn't prevent. He would not add Lily to that list. And in the midst of it all, Lily learned something new about courage. Courage wasn't loud. It wasn't anger. It was sitting at breakfast with shaking hands and still choosing to smile. It was walking into school even when whispers followed. It was allowing herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she belonged somewhere after all. And the fragile home they had built together became, quietly, a fortress. By the time spring settled over Montana, the valley air carried both the sweetness of thawed earth and the tension of unspoken fear. Cole Ranch moved as it always had. Horses fed at dawn, cattle driven along fence lines, tools repaired and sharpened. But beneath the steady rhythm of work, a quiet dread hummed. The anonymous petition had become more than rumor. It had become a date on the calendar, a courtroom, a reckoning, and it would decide whether Lily stayed or disappeared back into the machinery of the world that had already failed her once. Nathan Cole had never feared much in his life. Pain he could endure. Loneliness he had already made peace with. But the thought of Lily leaving, of that bedroom falling dark and empty again, settled in his chest like a stone. He spoke little about it, but Helen Park saw the way his scar tightened whenever Lily laughed. She saw the storm gathering in him, and in her calm, practical way, she prepared for battle as well. Jack Monroe brought word from town. Eleanor Hayes wrote letters. People chose sides without ever saying so out loud. Lily felt everything. She tried to hide it, She did her chores. She went to school. She answered questions at the dinner table in her small, steady voice. But each night she folded her rag doll into her arms and whispered promises to herself that she would not cry. Not again, not like before. She had learned to brace for loss long before Cole Ranch. That knowledge returned now, sharp as winter wind. Michael Turner arrived one evening just before sunset. He was measured, respectful, the kind of man who listened before he spoke. He sat with Nathan at the long wooden table while Lily and Helen prepared tea. Papers rustled softly. Legal words were spoken. Stability, well-being, guardianship. Turner explained that the case rested on 3 pillars: the strength of the home, Lily's growth, and the harm removal would cause. He spoke clearly, but for Nathan, each sentence only reinforced what he already knew. This was not just argument. This was life. The courtroom sat in the center of town, a square building with clean lines and a flag whispering in the wind above the door. On the morning of the hearing, people gathered early. Curiosity, judgment, concern. Every emotion wore the same polite expression. Nathan walked Lily up the steps slowly, his hand hovering near her back, not pushing, not pulling, just there. Her small fingers twisted around the worn fabric of her doll. When they entered, whispers rose like distant insects. The scar on his face caught the light. Some flinched. Lily didn't. Judge William Hayes presided with quiet gravity. His reputation was one of balance, fairness. He looked at Lily longer than most would have. Then the proceedings began. The opposing counsel spoke first. He painted Nathan as a solitary man lacking structure, a person scarred outside and likely scarred within. He spoke of the absence of a mother, of the unpredictability of ranch life, of the delicate nature of a child's mind. He never accused. He simply implied. An implication could cut as deeply as any blade. Lily sat very still. Then came the witnesses. Helen Park was the first to take the stand. She spoke plainly, her voice grounded in truth. She told the court Lily had arrived frightened and withdrawn, but under Nathan's care she had begun to thrive, sleeping peacefully, eating well, learning. She described routine, structure, kindness. The opposing attorney asked whether affection clouded her judgment. Helen's gaze did not waver. Affection, she said quietly, is what saved her. Jack Monroe followed. Rough hands, weathered face, direct words. He spoke of Nathan's steadiness, of respect among the men, of the way Lily rode out with Nathan on calm evenings and returned brighter than before. He did not lie. He did not embellish. When pressed about the scar and reputation, Jack only said, "A scar tells you someone survived. It doesn't tell you who they are." Eleanor Hayes spoke next. She described Lily's integration into community life, small though it was at first, and emphasized that safety was not about appearances. It was about consistency, care, and commitment. The lawyer probed. She did not bend. Nathan listened to every word, jaw tight, hands folded, heart braced. Then Lily was called. The courtroom seemed to shrink. She stepped forward, small shoes tapping softly against the wooden floor. When she answered, her voice was clear, unforced. She told the court she felt safe. She told them she slept without fear, that she was not hungry, that Nathan was there when she woke and there when she slept. She did not dramatize. She did not beg. When the attorney asked if she understood she might live in a more traditional home, Lily paused. Her gaze drifted to Nathan, then returned to the lawyer. "I don't need a perfect family," she said gently. "I need the one that chose me." Silence followed. Even those who had whispered against them fell quiet, confronted with the unpolished sincerity of a child who had nothing to gain by lying. Finally, Nathan was called. He stood with the weight of the range in his shoulders and the memory of loss etched across his face. He admitted he was not a man of many words, admitted he had made mistakes, admitted he could not promise life without hardship. But he also stated, steady, unwavering, that he would never abandon Lily, never treat her as temporary, never stop fighting for her safety. He did not present himself as heroic. He presented himself as responsible. Days passed before the ruling. They returned to the ranch and pretended at normalcy. Breakfast, chores, evening firelight. But every sound felt sharper, every silence heavier. Then the decision came. Judge Hayes ruled in favor of Nathan Cole. He cited the stability of the ranch, Lily's clear emotional growth, and the irrefutable testimony that separation would cause great harm. He acknowledged the unconventional nature of the household, then stated plainly that love and responsibility were not dependent on convention. Lily exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Outside the courthouse, Nathan rested a hand on her shoulder. He did not make a speech. He simply nodded once, deeply, as if sealing a vow. What had begun as a fragile experiment had now been tested by law, by rumor, by fear, and had endured. That night, as the Montana sky stretched wide and dark over Cole Ranch, a warm lamplight burned in Lily's bedroom window. Not as a signal, not as a warning, but as a home. Summer found its way into the valley like a long-awaited sigh, and with it came a gentler rhythm that seemed to settle into every corner of Cole Ranch. The court ruling had not erased the whispers in town, nor had it transformed Nathan Cole into a man suddenly fluent in emotion. But it had done something quieter, something deeper. It had anchored Lily Carter into the soil of that land, into the walls of that house, into the steady cadence of the man who had chosen her. And from that anchor she began to grow. There were still cautious mornings and careful glances. Healing, like the seasons, refused to be rushed. But Lily now walked through the house with a different kind of presence. Not as though she were passing through, but as though she had begun to settle into herself. She watered the small patch of garden Helen helped her plant behind the kitchen. She read books borrowed from the school library, sounding out longer words in the evenings while Nathan quietly repaired tools by lamplight. Sometimes she paused, waiting for irritation or impatience that never came. Sometimes she smiled when she realized it. Nathan noticed everything. He noticed the way Lily's posture slowly lifted. He noticed the way she spoke more freely at dinner. He noticed when she laughed without immediately covering her mouth, as if she had forgotten she was allowed to be happy. He did not say these things aloud, but he carried them like small, shining stones in his pocket. Precious, grounding, real. The first time Lily dared to call him Dad, the word slipped out almost accidentally. She had come in from the barn, dust on her boots and hair wind-blown, and asked him a simple question about supper plans. The word landed softly, naturally, without ceremony. Dad. And for a brief moment she seemed to freeze, afraid of having overstepped. Nathan didn't correct her. He just answered the question, and the world kept turning. But that night, as Lily lay in bed, the word echoed in her mind like a prayer finally whispered. School changed too, though not overnight. Some children remained distant, others softened. A boy named Thomas began walking with Lily after class, asking about the horses. A quiet girl named Emily shared books with her at recess. Lily didn't trust easily, but she began to understand that friendship wasn't something you forced. It was something that formed, slowly, between those who listened. Helen Park kept the house stitched together with calm efficiency, but beneath that order was affection she rarely named. She watched Lily begin to shine, and thought often of how fragile the line had once seemed between survival and belonging. Some evenings she and Nathan spoke quietly in the kitchen after Lily had gone to bed. Helen would mention the day's small victories, the way Lily volunteered answers in class now, the way she had learned to bake bread with steady, careful hands. Nathan listened, his expression unreadable to most, but there was warmth beneath the stillness. He had once believed his life would end as it began, solitary, contained, untouched. Now there was a child asleep under his roof who trusted him not to vanish. The adoption process moved forward with papers and signatures, but it also moved forward in 1,000 small, invisible ways. Lily began to relax into the certainty that she was not temporary. Her room filled slowly with objects that mattered. A stack of books, a folded quilt, drawings she never would have dared display before. She even placed her faceless rag doll on a shelf. no longer clinging to it out of fear, but honoring it as a part of her past that had finally found rest. When her birthday came, it wasn't just a date on a calendar. It became something entirely new. Helen decorated the dining room with simple ribbons. Jack and several of the ranch hands stopped by, awkward at first, but genuinely glad to see Lily beam with surprise. Eleanor Hayes arrived with a homemade cake, and for the first time in Lily's life, there were candles burning for her alone. She closed her eyes, not to wish for escape or rescue, but simply to seal the moment inside her heart. Nathan stood by the doorway, arms folded, Scar catching the glow of the candles. For a second he seemed almost out of place among the soft laughter and warm light. But then Lily met his eyes, and the distance disappeared. She began to excel in school, not because she sought approval, but because she finally had the space to think. Books became doors instead of walls. Writing became a way to understand herself. The injustice she had faced did not disappear. It transformed. It became purpose. She started asking questions about the law, about how decisions were made, about why some voices were heard and others ignored. Judge Hayes had spoken to her kindly after the ruling, and his presence lingered in her mind as a steady symbol of fairness. Somewhere beneath the big western sky, a seed of intention took root. Nathan, for his part, remained the same man he had always been, quiet, guarded, marked by his scar. But Lily now understood the difference between silence and indifference. His silence held care. His caution held history. And little by little, she discovered that love did not always arrive dressed in words. Sometimes it arrived in steady footsteps outside your bedroom door at night. Sometimes it was found in the way a man made sure there was always enough firewood for winter, enough food on the table, enough space for you to simply be. There were dark moments still. Nights when Lily woke from dreams of being taken away. Days when someone in town said something thoughtless. But those fears no longer defined her. They simply passed through, like clouds across an otherwise open sky. And so, in a house once filled with nothing but echoing emptiness, a family formed, not loud or flashy, not perfect or expected, but strong in the quiet way only those who have known loss can understand. The adoption papers would soon be signed, legal language confirming what Heart and Home had already declared. They were father and daughter now, not by blood, but by choice. And in the long shadows of the Montana evening, beneath the endless western sky, that choice glowed like a lantern against the dark. Time moved the way it often does in the West, quietly, steadily, carried forward by wind across open fields and seasons that turned without ceremony. Years layered themselves over Cole Ranch until the memories that once felt fragile became part of the land itself. Lily Carter, now Lily Cole by law and love alike, grew into a young woman whose presence carried both softness and resolve. She had inherited Nathan's steadiness, Helen's grace, and something entirely her own, a belief that futures could be chosen, even when the past had tried to shape them otherwise. She excelled at school. She read constantly. She began to travel to town not just for supplies or class, but to help at the small legal office where Michael Turner worked. He had once defended her right to stay. Now he guided her curiosity toward something more structured. She learned about custody laws, children's rights, the ways in which decisions were made and justified. She realized that the world often tangled itself in rules, and that sometimes those rules forgot the humans trying to survive beneath them. That realization did not harden her. It sharpened her compassion. Nathan watched all of this with an expression many mistook for distance, but which Lily now understood as pride. His scar had faded only slightly with time, still cutting a quiet mark along his cheek. His hair turned silver at the temples. His movements slowed a fraction. But his presence remained the anchor of Cole Ranch. He still rode out each morning when weather allowed. He still cared for the land as if it were both duty and prayer. And every evening, when Lily returned from town or finished her studies at the kitchen table, he seemed to breathe a little easier. The day the adoption papers were signed had been significant, yes, But the years that followed were what turned them into family. There were holidays spent quietly by the fire. There were seasons of drought when the ranch struggled and everyone worked harder than they thought possible. There were illnesses and storms and long summers scented with hay and sun-warmed dust. Through it all, Lily remained, no longer as a child who feared being taken away, but as a daughter who knew she belonged. In time, she left Montana briefly to attend university, a decision supported by Nathan, even though it meant empty chairs at the dinner table. She studied law, driven by the memory of standing small and steady in a courtroom while strangers debated her fate. She returned home after graduation, not because she lacked opportunity, but because the West had shaped her bones and the ranch still held her heart. She worked in advocacy, representing children whose lives had been as uncertain as hers once was. When she spoke in court now, it was with quiet clarity, never forgetting the day she was the one answering questions. Nathan aged the way men of the range do, slowly, visibly, with dignity. His hands remained strong, his voice remained low and even, but his steps grew heavier, and some mornings he needed more time to rise. Helen continued to manage the house with unshakable calm, though even she began to lean on younger hands to help with heavier tasks. Jack Monroe retired with humor and stubborn reluctance, though he never strayed far from the ranch. Eventually, Lily married, choosing a partner not because she feared being alone, but because she understood what it meant to build something lasting with another soul. Children followed, laughter circling through the house like sunlight. Nathan became the quiet grandfather who rarely spoke more than a sentence at a time, but whose steady presence grounded the family like the roots of an old tree. The scar on his face no longer drew whispers. It had become part of the story the children loved to hear, a mark of survival rather than fear. Sometimes, in late afternoon, Nathan would sit on the porch beneath the long shadow of the house and watch Lily's children chase each other across the yard. The air would hum with cicadas, and the sky would stretch wide and gold across the horizon. He would think of that New Year's morning years earlier, when he had stood in the bitter cold and listened to a small girl whisper that no one wanted her. He would remember the weight of that moment, a choice made without calculation, driven by instinct and something deeper than logic. He understood now that his life had forked in that instant. One path would have been emptiness. The other had led here, to noise and warmth and belonging. Lily never forgot either. There were evenings when she sat beside him and they spoke very little, because words were not always necessary. She would thank him, sometimes indirectly. He would shake his head and say only that she had saved him too. And in that understanding, unadorned, honest, they found peace. Montana remained as wild and beautiful as ever. Winter's snow still blanketed the ranch in thick, silent layers. Spring still brought green to the fields. Summer still shimmered with heat, and autumn painted the trees in soft gold. Through every season, Cole Ranch endured. So did the family that had formed there, not by accident, not by tradition, but by choice stronger than circumstance. And when the years stretched long and Nathan eventually became too tired to walk the land himself, he was never alone. Lily was there. The house was filled with voices. His life, once marked by silence and distance, ended surrounded by the sound of people who loved him without hesitation. The scar on his face remained, but now it told a different story. Not of violence, not of darkness, but of a man who had once been broken and still found the courage to reach out. Under the endless western sky, legacy was not a monument or a name etched in stone. Legacy was love that refused to turn away. Slowly now, let us bring the story to rest. Under the wide, quiet sky of Montana, time has softened the edges of every painful memory. We see Lily as a grown woman, strong and steady, guiding others with the same kindness once extended to her. We see Nathan, older, gentler, at peace with the life he created from a single, brave decision. The house at Cole Ranch glows warmly at dusk, children's laughter floating through open windows. And somewhere in that glow is the reminder that family is not bound by blood or expectation. It is chosen, shaped, and protected through love and loyalty. Let the final image fade slightly, like sunlight sinking into the horizon. The wind softens. The voice is quiet. And what remains is a feeling of calm reassurance that even in a world as wide and unpredictable as the West, two lonely souls once found one another, and everything changed for the better. Rest now with that thought. The story has come home. End of article. Good night.